Welcome Stardust. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Stephanie and I'm a crystal therapist and tarot and oracle card reader. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my Pagan Portal Book Haul, which is just in time for Halloween and Samhain season for any person that's on a spiritual path, a pagan path. There's something for everyone in the Pagan Portal universe. And I've accumulated quite a collection and I wanted to do a little bit of a rundown of the books that I have, discuss a little bit about them, let you know about them in summaries so you can maybe see if you want to purchase them, because there's these amazing spiritual occult and witchcraft books within the Pagan Portal Universe publishing company, and I think it's just perfect for Halloween season. So with that said, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, Snow Owl Crystals. I would very much appreciate it. I'm still trying to reach that 1,000 subscribers, and your support would be ever so greatly appreciated.
No!
Number 1, we have from Pagan Portals, Freya, Meeting the Norse Goddess of Magic by Morgan Daimler. This is one of my favorite authors, and because I am a Norse pagan and devotee to Freya, this is a must-have. I am so grateful to have found this author, and I really do feel that this author within Pagan Portals really does deliver a really great history, review, and practical knowledge and practices on how one can start their pagan path with the beautiful goddess of love, beauty, war, sex, and satyr, Freya. Now, let's take a listen at the summary of what this book is all about.
Pagan Portals, Freya, Meeting the Norse Goddess of Magic by Morgan Daimler offers a clear and accessible introduction to the Norse goddess Freya, also spelled Freya, one of the most intriguing and multifaceted figures in Norse mythology. The book traces Freya's origins, her roots among the Vanir, her role in mythic narratives filled with magic, fertility, war, and transformation, and examines the various historical, archaeological, and folkloric threads that contribute to our understanding of her. Daimler also explores how Freya has been interpreted, and sometimes misinterpreted, over time, clarifying popular misconceptions such as the relegation of her to a sex goddess stereotype. In addition to the lore, the book engages with how Freya lives in the modern world, how she appears in media and culture today, and how individuals might form their own connection with her through ritual, devotion, and personal experience, while also addressing the complexities of modern pagan practice, including the issue of white supremacist appropriation within some heathen contexts. All of this is packaged into a readable 100-page format with suggestions for practice, lists of correspondences and tools, and a bibliography for further study.
One of the things I wanted to mention about this book is on page 9, Freya by Any Other Names. I really love how she goes into a little bit of the cultural background and all of the different names that are associated with Freya. Things that I actually never really thought about are all in here. Not only do I get to learn about the Norse goddess, but I get to learn about the Vanir and Vanik veneration, as well as her brother Freyr, and it's just really amazing. There is some associations with Frigg. I know a lot of people think that maybe Freya and Frigg are the same type of goddess. I think they're a little bit different, but again, it really goes into detail in the Norse culture, and she does share with us a little bit about her personal experience with Freya, which is always a gem to have. I absolutely adore this book, and if you're interested in learning more about Freya, this is definitely a must-have for any occult student or pagan enthusiast. Number 2 from Pagan Portals is, of course, Odin, Meeting the Norse All-Father, again by Morgan Daimler. I absolutely adore this author. Like I mentioned, she really is concise in giving you the historical facts without any BS and really straightforward information, because Understanding the Norse pantheon and northern traditions can sometimes be a little bit scarce, a little bit complex, and maybe even reserved for academia. But this is really a great book for any layman, reader, or if you're on the path or on the craft at any level or at any spiritual belief systems. It's always of value to learn about the Norse god Odin. He's definitely infamous in pop culture and in movies, but there's just so much to this rich history and reverence to the Allfather, to Odin. I really love this book. Let's take a listen to the summary of Odin.
This book offers an approachable and thoughtfully written introduction to the Norse god Odin, also known as the All-Father, exploring his rich and multifaceted presence in ancient mythology and in modern spirituality. It opens with an overview of who Odin is, his many names, symbols, stories and roles, as god of wisdom, magic, poetry, war, death and more. Daimler then delves into Odin's mythological background, his place in the Norse pantheon, his myths and adventures, including how he acquires knowledge, such as the runes, and how he wanders and interacts with gods and humans. Importantly, the book also addresses how Odin has been understood, and sometimes reinterpreted, in non-Norse cultures, the persistence of his symbolism, and how his archetype remains relevant today. The final sections are more practical. Daimler brings in her own experiences of working with Odin, offering reflections, rituals, runic work, prayers and poetry to help readers form their own relationship with him, while remaining grounded, balanced and accessible. Overall, the book aims to bridge the gap between ancient lore and contemporary practice, giving readers both the story so far and the invitation to engage with Odin in their own spiritual path.
What I really appreciate in this book is that in chapter 7 there are prayers and poetry to Odin that she does include, and I think that's absolutely wonderful. Sometimes we're not all writers or poets ourselves, and we need a little bit of help on how we can chant, pray, meditate, and venerate the Norse pantheon, especially Odin. And Odin is, a person, a deity that really loves poetry. So I really do appreciate that this author took the time to write a little bit of poetry in honor of Odin. Number 3 from Pagan Portals is the 𝙂𝙤𝙬𝙧𝙎, the she, meeting the Irish fair folk, again from Morgan Daimler. And the she, as well as the fae, is very specialized. So she is going to introduce the fairy people, the fairy mounds, and she's going to take you to Ireland and other isles that are associated with this type of good neighbors. And it's good that if you're interested in the Fae, to learn as much as you can from different cultural perspectives, because it's not all fairies and Tinkerbells and Disney type of characters. There are different hierarchies, different groups of Fae, different species, so to speak. And I really think that Morgan Daimler is a really great person and author in regards to understanding the she and what it consists of. If you are planning to do anything in your fairy craft, I think this is an excellent book. Let's take a listen to the summary of the 𝙂𝙤𝙬𝙧𝙎.
This concise yet dense volume serves as an accessible introduction to the 𝙂𝙤𝙬𝙧𝙎, people of the fairy mounds, the otherworldly folk of Irish tradition. The book opens by surveying who the 𝙂𝙤𝙬𝙧𝙎 are, drawing on myth, folklore and historical sources to paint them as ancient, layered beings deeply woven into Ireland's land and cultural memory. Daimler proceeds to trace how belief in them has evolved, from early texts and oral traditions to modern interpretations, highlighting the ways pop culture has both distorted and simplified their nature. Among the most striking chapters are those on changelings, children allegedly taken by the fair folk, and other types of fair and weird folk, such as the bean Sidhe, the cat Sidhe, and seal folk, illustrating the complex and sometimes dark side of these beings. Crucially, the book doesn't stop at lore, there is also a practical element. Daimler offers guidance on safe dealings with the fairy folk, etiquette, respect, protective practices, and how to separate genuine belief from sensational or modernized myth. Finally, the text addresses common misconceptions and oversimplifications, emphasizing that these beings are not mere whimsical fairies but part of a living, land-rooted tradition. In short, while compact in size, the book provides a well-researched, clear and engaging overview of the 𝙂𝙤𝙬𝙧, ideal both for newcomers and for those already familiar with Celtic fairy lore who want a reputable reference.
So as we can see in chapter 4, types of fair folk, and she goes into all of the different types, from Scotland to the Fairy Hills to the Danu, to different places in the world, and going into different lores like the 𝙭𝙬𝙧, and really going into detail into different types of fair folk, good neighbors. And there's different, cultural perspectives, and it's really important to learn the different categories of the Fae if you want to get a broader understanding who they are. She even goes as far as, talking about leprechauns. Now, this is a small book, so it's very concise. It's to the point. It's well referenced. The bibliography is well referenced, and I think it's a really great resource book for any Fae enthusiast. Number 4, we have Pagan Portals, Gwyn, Nudd, Wild God of Faery, Guardian of 𝙂𝙤𝙬𝙬𝙧, and this one is from author Danu Forrest. And I do apologize if I'm not enunciating. Sometimes I get weird with enunciation, but this one is really about the type of fairy king. It's going to explore Glastonbury and the Thor, the fairy hills, and really a broad view of the Celtic underworld and the different figures that reside there. So this is going to expand your knowledge in regards to the fairy fate, or if you are thinking of working with the Fae, this is definitely a very good resource book, and I found it actually very interesting. Let's take a look at the summary of this book.
Gwyn ap Nudd, Wild God of Faery, Guardian of 𝙂𝙤𝙬𝙬𝙧 by Danu Forrest. This compact volume serves as an accessible yet rich introduction to Gwyn ap Nudd, a somewhat obscure but deeply potent figure in Welsh myth and fairy lore. The book traces Gwyn's mythic identity, as Lord of the Otherworld, 𝙂𝙤𝙬𝙬𝙧, King of the Brythonic fairy folk, the 𝑡ylwYTH, leader of the wild hunt, guardian of the dead, and companion to poets and visionaries. Wikipedia 1 Forrest explores the origins, name meanings. His name is often taken as white/bright, son of mist, and the literary and folkloric fragments that preserve his story. In addition to presenting myth and lore, the book offers a practical dimension. Each chapter includes meditations, rites, and pathworkings inviting the reader into direct engagement with Gwyn and the wild/underworld terrain he inhabits. Overall, it offers both a historical/spiritual portrait and an invitation for personal work, ideal for readers curious about Welsh tradition, fairy lore, psychopomp archetypes, and nature-rooted practice.
In chapter 2, we have 𝙂𝙤𝙬𝙬𝙧 and the realm of Faery, and it's pronounced 𝙂𝙤𝙬𝙬𝙧, 𝙂𝙤𝙬𝙬 in the realm of fairies. And basically, it's going to go through the entire lore. So it does cross-reference, the mixture of Christianization as they dominated over the heathen and pagan subcultures in the past, and how things are related today and how things are named today. But this is a very well-researched book in regards to understanding the different fairy realms and what to look for and what could be residing in those realms. So again, this is an extremely insightful book in regards to the Fae. Number 5, we have Pagan Portals, Fairy Queens, Meeting the Queens of the Other World, again by Morgan Daimler. As you can see, I'm a fan of this author. And this is specialized in the queens of the courts and of different hierarchies within the fairy realms specifically. So this is a very niche type of book. Let's take a listen to the summary of the Fairy Queens.
Pagan Portals, Faery Queens by Morgan Daimler. This compact, about 104-page volume explores the realm of the Faery Queens, the female sovereign figures of the otherworld, through the lens of folklore, mythology, and modern practice. Morgan Daimler begins by outlining the etiquette and risks of engaging with the good people, the fair folk, emphasizing that working with the queens is serious and requires respect. The book then profiles several fairy queens drawn primarily from the Scottish and Irish traditions, offering stories, attributes, correspondence suggestions, and guided meditations to help readers meet or connect with them. It also examines how fairy queens appear in literature and popular culture, how modern fantasy and media reflect or distort their older folklore forms, and reflects on how contemporary practitioners might approach them meaningfully today. Overall, the work bridges lore and practice, giving readers both mythic background and practical tools for journeying into the fairy realm and honoring the queens of the otherworld.
So yes, when you reach up to chapter 9, working with the fairy queens, she does a really good breakdown of what it consists to have respect, have proper ritual, proper preparation, honoring them, dedication work, negotiating sacred space, even having a pilgrimage, what to do if things go wrong, and there's all these endnotes and conclusions, really going through the entire process. It's extremely to the point. It's a very thin book, so it's not going to have a lot of wordy, elaborate explanations, but it really is concise. So you really have to take the information and use it as a map, as a guidebook, as an illustration of what one can do when you're starting the fairy faith. And including the fairy queens is extremely important in that pursuit. So at number 6, we have Pagan Portals, Your Fairy Magic. Discover what it means to be Fae and unlock your natural power by Quinn. Let's take a look at the summary for this book.
Your Fairy Magic by Quinn. This book is a warm, accessible guide for anyone who has felt a subtle pull toward the world of the Fae-hearted, and wants to explore what it means to live with, or alongside, that enchantment. It opens with the invitation: have you ever felt that you were different? That the other world was closer for you than it is for other folk? Quinn defines Fae not merely as a type of fairy or mythical creature, but as a quality of human spirit, those who are attuned to the wild, liminal spaces, to nature, imagination, and mystery. The book walks the reader through a journey. It introduces the path of fairy magic, helps you prepare, through exercises such as building a travel kit, altar, grounding, trance, and then guides you to meeting your fairy guide, visiting Faery Island, honoring the fairy heart in everyday life. Importantly, the work doesn't treat fairy magic as mere whimsy or fairy tales. It acknowledges the wild, untamed, and serious nature of these spirits and this path, emphasizing authenticity, respect, and self-discovery rather than simply cute fairy craft. For example, the author mentions her own earlier frustration that very little fairy-specific information that properly prepares the seeker for such work existed, so she wrote this book to fill that gap. In sum, if you're curious about stepping into a fairy-inflected spiritual path, one rooted in nature, imagination, self-exploration, and the subtle realms of magic, this book offers both the mindset and the practical tools, meditations, journal prompts, exercises, to begin that journey.
I'm going to be perfectly frank, and unfortunately this book does not get a good review in my perspective. I've been reading a lot on the fairy fate and how to proceed carefully in fairy witchcraft, and I think that this is a fluff piece. I'm incredibly disappointed with Pagan Portals. I'm sorry to the author. I don't resonate with you. I think that this author is what is wrong in the new age type of spirituality. Fairies are not these fuzzy bunny, fuzzy warm creatures that are always out for your best intention or like a fairy type of godmother. They're a lot more harsh, a lot more alien, a lot more different. than other types of spirits, and they're not really there to cater to humans' well-being and will. It's really a person that wants to communicate with them and work with them through mutual respect, mutual projects, and for the betterment of evolution and enlightenment between the two species. So I really feel that this is what is actually wrong with the new age and the new types of spirituality that people talk about with the Fae. They make fairy magic seem very accessible and fluffy, that access to them is really easy. And although she may put a couple of points that are, a little bit, like she does cover like cautionary tales, correspondences, a little bit of the history, but the way that she writes is extremely childish and elementary to my taste. And I feel a lot of the magic has to do with Wicca. It has nothing to do with actual fairy fate. What is your fairy heart, your fairy magic? And kind of like, I understand this cultural perception of looking at fairies as like nature spirits and elementals and communicating with nature. But in my own personal practice and in my own personal belief systems, the Fae and the Fae beings are actually not the same as nature spirits and or elementals. They're quite other types of interdimensional beings. And once you're working with them and once you try to expand your clairvoyance and your mediumship and you try to have more accuracy, you're going to see that very clearly. So to kind of be like leading people to going to the garden and dancing around and leaving offerings and, writing wishes, and these are all fluffy kind of things and mostly geared towards more nature spirits, especially, you can look at the trees, which are the dryads. There are nature spirits that are a little bit more docile and a little bit more receptive to human contact. But when you work with the actual Fae, you have to treat it like you're going into the jungle and you're trying to make friends with a wild tiger, with a wild type of jungle animal. It can be done through patience and training and trial and error. And then once you tame yourself and you prove to them, to the tiger, that you're a friend and not a foe, and you build that relationship, then you can maybe have an exchange of energy and knowledge. But if you go in there, with a beautiful like flower, handing it over to the tiger is going to eat you. And unfortunately, I did not resonate with this book, but I did purchase it, so I have to add it to my Pagan Portals. Number 7 is Pagan Portals Merlin, Once and Future Wizard by Elen Sentier. And I purchased this book because in 2024 I went to Glastonbury, UK. I was very fortunate to visit Tintagel Castle and to go to different places in Glastonbury. And of course there was the lore of Merlin, and I really felt the spirit of Merlin during that trip. So I wanted to learn more about him. This is just an okay kind of book. But before I get into my little mini review, let's look at the summary of this book.
Pagan Portals Merlin by Elen Sentier. This book offers an intimate exploration of the legendary figure Merlin, best known from the Arthurian tales, by combining myth, folklore, history, personal narrative and spiritual guidance. Sentier begins with an accessible grounding in who is Merlin, discussing the possible historical, folkloric and mythic layers that have built around Merlin over a millennium and more. From there she guides the reader through Merlin's appearances in story, poetry, landscape, for example the Welsh marches and places like Broceliande, and the shape-shifting/liminal aspects of his nature. Sentier also shares her own walk with Merlin, reflections on how Merlin has worked with her in a native British shamanic context, how he appears as a teacher, trickster, threshold walker, land spirit and guide of transformation. The final part of the book invites the reader into relationship with Merlin. How one might engage with him today, how the liminal threshold he embodies can help one in one's personal path of change and growth. In short, the book bridges Merlin's old mythic roots and his relevance for contemporary magical/spiritual practice, making the legendary wizard approachable as both mythic figure and living presence.
So what you're going to get from this book is you're going to get an author that is going to explain a lot of UPGs, unverified personal gnosis, and that you have to take with a grain of salt. This is a person's perspective. It's not actual fact. And I'm all for UPGs and spiritual experiences within the collective. She doesn't go as in detail of Merlin in regards to an academic or historical context. There is a very brief overview and reference of that. And then it goes into spiritual theories like in chapter 8, Merlin and liminal thresholds. And Merlin is a god of edges. He is without limits. So she goes into what she perceives Merlin to be as an entity, as a spirit, as a shapeshifter. And this is solely her subjective opinion. When you cross-reference that with other spiritual groups of thought and academia, it doesn't, correlate. So this is a very subjective type of book, and you have to be able to recognize the difference. So, take it with a grain of salt. It was enjoyable to read. It's not my absolute favorite. I'm looking more for historical things, and I do appreciate a good ghost story or a good UPG, but it's extremely biased in the perceptive of who she thinks Merlin is, which may or may not be true. Number 8 is Pagan Portals, the Norns, Weavers of Fate and Magic by Irisanya Moon. And I am on a quest of collecting interesting books in regards to the Norse pantheon, the northern traditions, honoring Icelandic, Germanic, Scandinavian, Norwegian, Sweeten, Germanic cultures of the Norse, Viking traditions of the Iron Age and the Bronze Age and in antiquity, especially when it comes to the Norse pantheons. It does spread across Europe and different areas. But the Norns is definitely a specialized topic in my practice that I'm trying to learn more about. I haven't dived deep into my own personal connection with them. I haven't read this book yet, but I hope it has what I'm looking for in regards to cultural references and a little bit more practical practices on how to connect with the Norns, because it is something I haven't done yet and I'm looking for ideas in doing so. So let's take a listen at what this book is all about.
Pagan Portals, the Norns by Irisanya Moon. This book offers a clear, accessible guide to the Norns, the three mythic beings, 𝑒ðr, verdandi and skuld, in Norse tradition who weave, measure and cut the threads of fate. The author begins by situating the Norns at the base of the world tree in Norse cosmology, and explains how their functions overlap with broader concepts of fate, destiny and change. The book then moves into definitions and explanations of key Norse myth ideas such as 𝑤𝑖𝑟d, one's personal fate or becoming, 𝑜rlog, ancestral or universal lot, and how the Norns weaving reflects our lives across past, present, and future. Afterwards, the text delves into each Norn individually, their mythic roots, symbolic meanings, how they relate to human experience, and provides guided meditations, ritual practices and journaling prompts so readers can engage with them directly. In its final sections, the book offers advice on cultivating a respectful and sustained relationship with the Norns, or any fate-weaving spirit, setting intentions, understanding one's limits, recognizing when to withdraw, and how one's personal thread fits into a larger pattern. It also shows how working with the Norns can be relevant to self-growth, transformation, and understanding one's place in time and lineage. Overall, if you're looking for a modern, experiential introduction to the Norns that blends mythic scholarship with hands-on practice, this volume is a strong choice.
So I'm just peeking through this, and I'm seeing this symbol here, and I'm not 100% sure just from memory, but I'm in the process of collecting information on the ruins and different types of Norse sigils that have been created in antiquity and that have been fabricated through Reconstructionism, meaning that it either started, I don't know, in the 1800s or the early 1900s or maybe even sooner. And we, the public, think that they're like these ancient things, but they're not. There's a lot of sigils and symbolism in Norse and Viking traditions that are not authentically so in history. And a lot of the symbols that I found in magic, to my surprise, have been actually Christian witchcraft, Christian types of symbolism, or a marriage between the Old Norse ways and Christianity because of the Christianization in the 1900s. So when I see symbols like that, I have to do more research and just know what's fact and fiction. It's okay to have reconstructed symbols for the modern world, for the modern psyche, as long as we know what is what and we don't have delusions about it. So just take that into consideration. But if you are interested in Norse paganism, I'm going to be doing a lot more videos on my second YouTube channel, and it's called Sacred Stories, Old Norse Tradition Self-Taught. It's basically my own journey into Norse paganism, and I really do try to provide valuable videos and references to actual facts of how things are in the Northern tradition and how we can proceed on an esoteric and spiritual level. And it's my own personal journey in that faith. So if you are interested, check out my second YouTube channel. Number 9 from Pagan Portals, Thor by Morgan Daimler. So yes, I did purchase all of the Norse pantheons, deities as much as I could from Pagan Portals, and they're mostly written by Morgan Daimler, so I know it's a reliable source and author that I enjoy and that I like, that I feel is credible. So this is Thor and going through, his mythology in the Norse tradition, and let's take a listen at the summary of what this book is about.
Pagan Portals Thor by Morgan Daimler. This concise volume offers an accessible introduction to the Norse god Thor, exploring his mythological roots, evolving symbolism, and relevance for modern practitioners. According to the publisher, Thor is an immensely popular god but also one of contradictions, whose complexity is sometimes underrated. Although many people know Thor as the hammer-wielding hero of pop culture, the book emphasizes his deeper roles: thunder god, stormbringer, guardian of human communities, fertility bestower, wedding blesser, and defender of order. Daimler begins by introducing who is Thor, placing him in his Norse cosmological context, his lineage, his myths, for example his encounters with giants, his control of thunder and storms, and his complex relationship with other gods and beings. She then moves into Thor in mythology and Thor in other places, chapters that examine his appearances beyond the most familiar stories, such as regional folklore, Germanic traditions, and localized cults. Next, she covers Thor's possessions, symbols and associations, explaining his tools, such as his hammer, belt, gloves, his iconography, his animals, goats, chariot, and what they can mean for symbolic work. The book also has a chapter on Thor in the modern world which surveys how Thor has been represented in popular media, comics, movies, fantasy, and how that has influenced and sometimes distorted our understanding of him. Finally, the chapter Connecting to Thor Today offers practical suggestions for those wanting to engage with Thor in personal spiritual or devotional practice, including meditations, reflection prompts, setting up an altar or offering, and considerations for ethical and culturally respectful engagement. Throughout, Daimler strikes a balance between scholarship, discussing mythic texts, etymology, archaeological evidence, personal reflection, sharing her own experiences and how she came to work with Thor, and accessible guidance for newcomers. The goal is not to fully exhaust the divine's complexity in 100 pages, but to provide a solid foundation, to untangle older beliefs from modern pop culture. In short, if you're curious about Thor, beyond the superhero or simplified thunder god stereotype, this book gives you both the mythic backstory and the path to invite his presence into contemporary pagan or heathen practice.
So as we can see in chapter 4, Thor's possessions, symbols, and associations, the home and the Mjolnir, and Thor's hammer and the belt and the gloves and the staff and the goats, and the thunder and the weather and the funerals and the fertility. Thor in my life. Whenever I see Thor in my life or a deity in her life, she does explain her own personal experience with deity, which is always a pleasure to read. So even though it is, again, thin and concise, it does have very valuable information in regards to learning more about the Norse pantheon. Number 10 is Pagan Portals Loki, Trickster and Transformer. And this one is written by 𝙂𝙤𝙤𝙧𝙙𝙪𝙨𝙪. And I haven't read this one yet, but this is all about Loki, the mythology, the correspondences, and let's take a listen at the summary of what this book is about.
Pagan Portals Loki by 𝙂𝙤𝙤𝙧𝙙𝙪. This compact volume, about 100 pages, offers a grounded yet dynamic introduction to the Norse god Loki, not merely as the mischievous antagonist of myth, but as a complex figure of transformation, boundary crossing, and necessary change. Both mythic and devotional, it blends scholarship with practitioner-friendly material. 𝙂𝙤𝙪 begins by asking who is Loki. Summarizing key mythic episodes, his identity as son of Laufey, his role in the death of Baldur, his binding, his participation in the end times, and situating Loki in the wider Norse cosmology. He emphasizes that Loki is neither simply villain nor comic trickster, but a figure whose disruption and cunning bring hidden truths to light and whose shape-shifting nature challenges fixed categories. A strong portion of the book is oriented toward practice. Each chapter is structured around one of Loki's many epithets, for example 𝙂𝙁, the fire from heaven, 𝙬𝙬𝙪, the life-giver, 𝑖n/𝑠𝑙𝑎𝑔𝑖, the cunning god, etc. With each name the author offers, origin/meaning of the epithet, mythic connections, and then a ritual task or devotional exercise, such as making a Loki candle, creating a 𝙂𝙁𝙪 amulet, or a Lokiblot, for readers to work with. Moreover, the book includes a section on 9 Lokian virtues, a Lokian daily practice, and a dedication ritual for those who wish to enter a devotee relationship with Loki, making it practical for those interested in devotional polytheism rather than purely myth study. Importantly, 𝙂𝙁𝙪 does not sugarcoat complexity or risk. The book includes a warning chapter or note about working with Loki, who is described as a chaos deity, and emphasizes the importance of discernment, personal responsibility, and the shadow side of transformation. In short, this book functions as both a mythic overview of Loki's roles, trickster, changer, bound god, sovereign challenger, and a hands-on guide to contemporary devotional, ritual and magical engagement. It is well suited for someone who has at least a basic familiarity with Norse myth and wants to deepen into relationship or practice with Loki.
So as we can see in chapter 11, Becoming a Laconian, and it talks about Icelandic literature, Scandinavia, the pledging, the oaths, and then Norse mythology, when we talk about the matron and the patron, it's actually a Fulltrúi, F-U-L-L-T-R-U-I, Fulltrúi, is basically taking an oath. And I had taken an oath to Freya and Odin in my particular practice, but I do plan to work with all of the specific Norse pantheons to see what insights and information they can provide to me to better my spiritual development. And there are many people on YouTube and many people in the spiritual community that do consider themselves Laconian, and I think it's a very unique and beautiful path. It's not for the faint of heart. It is definitely for the rebel nature in those that feel called to that. But my limited experience with Loki has been nothing but positive, and an excellent deity to work in regards to shadow work and facing your fears. Number 11, Pagan Portals, Frigg, Beloved Queen of Asgard by Ryan McClain. So of course, I have to learn more about Frigg. I have to understand more about her mythology. I know a lot of people synchronize her with Freya, but I do actually believe they are two separate female deities, just in my personal opinion, but again, that's subjective, and there's no way for any of us to prove it either way. So again, I haven't read this yet, but this is a great addition to my collection of the Norse pantheons in Pagan Portals. Let's take a listen at the summary of what this book is about.
Pagan Portals Frigg by Ryan McClain. This book serves as a thoughtful and accessible introduction to the Norse goddess Frigg, wife of Odin, queen of the Aesir, and a major figure in Norse myth and modern practice. The text begins by surveying the early sources and attestations of Frigg, her name origin, etymology, role in Germanic and Norse mythology, her appearances in the Poetic Edda and Prose Edda, and how her image shifts between historical record and legend. McClain then explores Frigg's many facets. She is portrayed as goddess of marriage and motherhood, of domestic life and the weaving of fate, of prophecy and home hearth. In this way, the book emphasizes that she is not simply a domestic goddess but also a figure of sovereignty, wisdom, and subtle power. Further, the author turns to how Frigg's narrative and symbolism can be meaningful for contemporary practitioners. The book includes discussion of her handmaidens, the subordinate goddesses or Aesir, whom she works through, her correspondences, objects, symbols, altars, and guidance on how one might build a devotional connection to her, whether in daily life, ritual, or contemplative practice. In sum, the book blends credible scholarship, source citations, mythic context, etymology, with author reflections and practical steps, making it suitable both for newcomers to Norse deity work and for more experienced practitioners who wish to deepen their relationship with Frigg.
So in Chapter 6, Acts of Devotion to Frigg, it goes into altars, goes into offerings, prayers, and then she even provides a lot of different prayers and chants and mantras to Frigg, which I think is very valuable. Holy days, going into the bolts. And what's interesting because I've always been in the past, like Wiccan, eclectic pagan, I've had many different types of transitions. But transitioning into the Norse paganism, trying to learn the Norse calendar and the different wheel of the year and the different celebrations and bolts has been a little bit challenging. It's a little bit more foreign and unique to me, so it does take time to learn, but she does cover a little bit about the Norse calendar and the different types of special holidays that are associated within the Norse pantheon, which is great in enriching your practice in the Norse tradition. Number 12 is Pagan Portals Raven Goddess, going deeper with the Morgan Daimler. This is an extension to her book on the Morgan. This is an excellent book in regards to learning about the Tuatha Danann, and of course the Morgan and what she's all about, her history and how to be a devotee, or even just working with her in your spiritual practice. Let's take a listen at the summary of this book.
Pagan Portals Raven Goddess by Morgan Daimler. This book offers a deeper dive into the Celtic goddess the Morrigan, following on from Daimler's earlier work, such as Pagan Portals, the Morrigan. It aims to clear up common misconceptions about the Morrigan, explore lesser-known facets of her myth and practice, and provide accessible guidance for readers wishing to form a devotional relationship with her. Major points of the book include a review of the historical and linguistic evidence for the Morrigan's antiquity and status as a goddess, countering claims that she is primarily a modern invention. A chapter, or section, devoted to the Morrigan's relationship with the hero 𝑒𝑜𝑒𝑡𝑒𝑚, how tradition has interpreted their interaction, and how different translations and viewpoints cast the story in new light. A strong focus on the theme of sovereignty and the Morrigan's role as a land and warrior goddess, including how the concept of sovereignty can be translated into modern spiritual life. Practical suggestions for devotional work. These include shrine setting, offerings, visits, or reflections on sacred places associated with the goddess, and meditative or reflective practices to deepen one's connection. Attention to myth-busting. Daimler addresses misunderstandings such as equating the Morrigan with the Arthurian Morgan le Fay, or reducing her to only a battle or sex goddess, clarifying what the classical and folk sources actually state. In short, if you're already familiar with the basics of the Morrigan and want a thoughtful yet accessible resource that takes you beyond who she is into how you might work with her, this book presents mythic, historical, and devotional strands in a compact, 100 pages, format.
So in chapter 6, we see ancient goddess in the modern world, and it talks about the Morrigan and sovereignty and how she is seen in the modern world, and the idea of the Morrigan versus the mother goddess, and really looking at different perspectives on that. And she really goes into detail in regards to the Irish history, culture, society. It really is important to learn about Irish culture when you're going into the Morrigan, because it is associated with Irish paganism. Number 13, we have Pagan Portals, the Morrigan meeting the Great Queen, Morgan Daimler. So this is the first installation, and then the previous one is like the second installation in regards to learning about the Morrigan. Let's take a look at what this book is all about.
Pagan Portals the Morrigan by Morgan Daimler. This book presents an accessible yet richly layered introduction to the Irish goddess the Morrigan, as well as the related war/sovereignty goddesses 𝑒𝙁 and 𝑚aiche, who together bear the title Great Queens. It begins by outlining who the Morrigan is, her names, epithets, associations, war, battle, prophecy, death, sovereignty, magic, and how she appears in early Irish myth and folklore. Daimler then addresses how the various strands of myth, legend, and folklore have often become entangled or contradictory, and offers a clear-eyed review of her sources alongside her own reflections as a modern practitioner. One section focuses on the Morrigan's goddesses' sisters, 𝑒𝙁, 𝑚aiche, and other figures who've at times borne her title, exploring how the Great Queens might be one figure, many, or an overlapping collective. The book also looks at her animals, ravens, crows, horses, her presence in mythic texts, and her ongoing relevance today, including how modern devotees engage with her responsibly. Though compact, about 92 pages, it combines solid historical grounding with personal experience and practical suggestions, so it works both as mythic background and a devotional doorway.
So in chapter 3, we see the 𝑒𝙁, goddess of prophecy, and it goes into historical context in regards to, this is all about the different types of battles in the pantheon of the Irish Tuatha and it's very rich in history in regards to the Irish peoples and to the land of the Irish of Ireland. And it's really important to find credible resources. And I know Morgan Daimler is very respectful of that. So this is a great context in learning the historical context of the myths of the Tuatha in the Irish folklore of those lands. Number 14 is Pagan Portals, Animal Magic, Working with the Spirit Animal Guides, by Rachel Patterson. And I haven't read this yet, but this really intrigued me because I do want to work more with the animal consciousness, animal communication, and I have an affinity for animals, especially cats and dogs and pretty much any animal, but domestic animals I have an affinity for, especially ravens and crows and birds and owls. So I wanted to learn more on how I can connect with the animal consciousness, and I thought that this book would be a very good research point. I haven't read it yet, so I don't know how credible it is, but I wanted to mention it because it is part of my Pagan Portal collection. Let's take a look at what this book is all about.
Pagan Portals Animal Magic by Rachel Patterson. This book offers a friendly, approachable introduction to working with animal spirit guides and animal magic. According to the publisher, it shows how to find, recognize, connect and work with the power of animal magic. Patterson begins by sharing her own journey, growing up with pets and spending time on a farm, and how that led her into noticing animal guides in her spiritual practice. She then defines key terminology, different words and emphasizing that the best term is the one that resonates with the individual. The core sections of the book cover what animal magic is, how spirits of animals or real animals can function as guides or allies. Techniques such as meditation and spells for meeting your animal guide or familiar. More advanced or varied themes, shape-shifting, in spirit journey sense, shadow animals, working with animal parts in magic, divination and omens connected to animals. Symbolism of animals, animal deities, and how animal magic relates to the elements, air, water, earth, and ritual contexts. Throughout, Patterson emphasizes intuition, personal connection, and ethical respect, for instance being mindful of cultural appropriation, in choosing words like totem/𝑉𝙬, and the free will of animals, real or spirit. In summary, if you are new to working with animal guides, this book gives a solid starting point, combining myth, meditation, ritual suggestions, and practical awareness, while also offering some ideas for those more familiar with the topic.
Ooh, there is a section about shape-shifting and practical and mystical aspects of shape-shifting, especially when it comes to animals. And there's some shape-shifting visualizations, an animal guide, medicine wheel. So yes, so I'm sensing that this is going to be a cultural melting pot of different traditions, probably within shamanism, within Aboriginal creation stories, because usually the Aboriginals have a lot of ties when it comes to working with animal spirit guides. And we'll see how far it goes into, if it goes into witchcraft and Wicca or different types of pagan practices. We'll see how it goes. But I think that this is a really good addition. I felt really attracted to it, and I'm so looking forward to reading it. Number 15, Pagan Portals, Seeking the Primal Goddess. And this is by an author, 𝒜𝓈𝓉𝓇𝒶. I have not read this book, but this is going to be about the goddess, and it says old European world. So I don't know which angle they're going to take, but I am starting my own personal research in regards to what do we know about what we consider the primordial goddess, so the original divine feminine, in regards to her form and how she manifested. Do we see her through the earth Sophia, or do we see her as the cosmic mother, like Nyx in the sky in Egyptian pantheon? So we're going to see where this is going to lead. I'm not 100% sure, but maybe by listening to the summary we can get a better idea of where this is going.
Pagan Portals Seeking the Primal Goddess by 𝑒𝐿𝑖𝐻𝑖𝐻. This compact volume undertakes a provocative exploration of the Great Mother archetype across ancient European cultures, combining findings from archaeology, archaeomythology, and mitochondrial DNA research to ask whether the goddess of modern paganism truly reflects the primal deity of old Europe, or whether our spiritual image of her is a far-removed echo. It invites readers to trace ancestral migrations, symbolic formations of goddess figures, and even the possibility of inherited spiritual memory or genetic coding linking us to goddess-worshipping forebears. Ultimately, the book challenges the reader to consider not only how the goddess has been shaped by cultural change, but also how our own practices and roots may align, or misalign, with those ancient templates, and offers exercises, so-called hearth fire exercises, to help engage with these questions personally.
So chapter 4 is entitled Beyond the Veil, and I'm not 100% sure where this author is going. I think it's more of a piece looking at different cultural references, Neolithic goddesses, which is good because I do want to try to go back in time in different parts of the world, who they consider to be the primal goddess, who they consider to be the goddess figure, where goddess veneration first started. That's what I'm really interested in. So I'm hoping there's going to be some gems in this, but I'm not sure. But I think it's going to be a very interesting read. So number 16, we have Pagan Portals Baba Yaga, Slavic Earth Goddess by Natalia Clark. And I'm extremely interested in learning about Baba Yaga. I have not worked with her, but I am also very much attracted to the Slavic Scandinavian pantheon, which is very different than the Norse pantheon. So I'm slowly, dipping my toe in the waters of that. And I thought that this would be a very good jumping start. So let's take a look at the summary of this book.
Pagan Portals Baba Yaga by Natalia Clark. This concise volume offers an accessible yet richly layered introduction to the Slavic goddess Baba Yaga, the wild crone of the forest, whose lore spans both fearsome and transformative roles. Clark blends folklore, personal reflections, and spiritual practice to show how Baba Yaga is not merely a folkloric witch figure, but a powerful earth deity of mystery, initiation, and shadow work. The text invites the reader on an apprenticeship journey, exploring her symbolism, examining her ambiguous nature, and offering tools, journal prompts, meditations, correspondences, for engaging with her as a living presence. Ultimately, the book encourages a deeper encounter with the wild, liminal terrain of psyche and spirit, helping the reader to transform fear into empowerment, and to build a meaningful devotional or inner practice with a goddess who refuses to be domesticated.
So as I can see here, chapter 6, Baba Yaga and the Seasons, talking about, Samhain. That's interesting. Chapter 7 is correspondences and other cultures. Okay. Chapter 9, mirror magic. Okay, so then chapter 10, working with Baba Yaga. And then we have some journal entries from the author. So they obviously worked with this entity. So that's going to be interesting to read. And for Baba Yaga, the apprenticeship into wisdom and intuition is not a journey of progression to the next and to the next and to the next, but instead it's about pausing, stopping, maybe going back several times and then moving forward again with a renewed learning. Ooh, renewed learning. Sign me up, please. I do feel a little bit of a, attraction to Baba Yaga, but I have to pace myself because in my spiritual discipline, I give reverence where reverence is due and I take one step at a time. And right now I'm still working through the Norse pantheon. But I do have this in my reading list. I'm continuously reading like occult books, spiritual books, deity books, witchcraft books. I'm always continuously, pushing myself to learn all things, not just specialize in one thing. I do have more specialized books than others, but I do always try to broaden my horizon, and I think that this would be a great addition to any occult enthusiast. So this is number 17, Pagan Portals, Celtic Fairies in North America, again by Morgan Daimler. And I'm so excited because I just bought this in October of 2025. It's one of her most recent books, so I haven't read it. I actually just got it this week, and I'm super thrilled to be expanding my knowledge and my horizons in regards to the fairy fate and Celtic fairies in North America, and learning more about the different traditions in regards to the Fae. I think it's going to be a great addition to anyone interested in learning about the good neighbors.
Pagan Portals Celtic Fairies in North America by Morgan Daimler. Here's a narrative-style summary of Pagan Portals, Celtic Fairies in North America by Morgan Daimler, including author info, publisher, and year of release. In this inviting and meticulously crafted short guide, Morgan Daimler explores a fascinating question. What became of the Celtic fair folk when the Irish, Scottish, and other Celtic diasporas landed in North America? Daimler pulls you through 4 centuries of folklore in Canada, the United States, and Mexico, showing how belief in the good neighbors didn't vanish at the sea but adapted, transformed, and still speaks to communities today. Highlights from reviews point out how Daimler balances solid folklore research, field stories, immigrant memory, colonial records, with the lived encounters of modern practitioners, and how they maintain a respectful stance toward indigenous traditions while tracing the threads of Celtic Faery belief. Morgan Daimler is a well-regarded writer in modern pagan and folkloric streams, especially known for demystifying complex mythic terrain in approachable form. If you've ever wondered whether the fairies hopped across the ocean too, and what shape they took in new lands, this book offers a clear, engaging doorway into that world.
Okay. Okay, so yes, she does talk about chapter 2, Canada, so Canadian influences in regards to the Fae, and in chapter 3, the United States, the different types of fairies that have been seen there. And then let's see, contemporary experiences, and then we have, okay, that's a lot. And then blurry lines. I don't know what she means by that. So, okay, so yeah, so it's going to be her take on her discoveries and her findings. And like everything else, she's well documented everything. So I am so looking forward to this. This is the new edition that she just fulfilled, and I think the book is beautiful, and I think it's really going to help to bridge the difference between what we see in pop culture and what is actually real in history and how we interact with the Fae in the modern world. So in addition to that, there is another book coming out that's going to be released in April of 2026, and it's going to be called The Faery Courts by Morgan Daimler. And this is going to be an amazing addition to all of her works in regards to the Fae. So I'm very excited for that. I am going to purchase it when it gets released in April. But in the meantime, I did a little research, and let's take a listen to what this book is going to be all about.
The Faery Courts by Morgan Daimler. This book is only released in April of 2026. In this richly layered exploration, Morgan Daimler takes you into the hidden architecture of fairy society, the so-called courts of the Fae folk, tracing their roots in Scottish folkloric belief, such as the 𝑘𝓚 and 𝑘𝓚 courts, and following their evolution into modern fiction, pop culture, and spiritual practice. Daimler deftly weaves together historical lore, field stories, and modern commentary, asking not only what the fairy courts were in tradition but how they are being imagined and enacted today. Reviewers praise the book's readable style and its thoughtful balancing of academic context and approachable writing. If you've ever wondered how the fairy courts came to matter, not just in old tales but in modern myth-making and devotional paths, this book offers a thoughtful doorway into that terrain.
So that concludes my Pagan Portals book haul. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you found it kind of interesting to see all the different Pagan Portal books that they have available. It is a very tiny book, but I find it's a very valuable book. I do have 3 honorable mentions in regards to books that might enhance your Halloween or Samhain experience, or that are a must-read for any person on the path of spirituality or the craft. So, the honorable mention is, again, from Morgan Daimler, Faery, The Other World by Many Names. And what I really like about this book is that it really goes into what the other world means in historical context, in the lore, and folk magic and folk traditions. And it's a really good addition in understanding where these realms or where these dimensional planes could be on an esoteric level, which is not very much discussed. But let's take a peek at what this book is summarized to be.
Honorable mentions. Faery The Other World by Many Names by Morgan Daimler. Offers a compact yet richly layered exploration of the Fae realm, what Daimler terms the Otherworld, as it appears throughout Celtic and British culture and into modern popular consciousness. The book traces the evolution of fairy belief from the Irish Sidhe/𝑘𝓚 through Scottish Elfland, English fairy lore, and the 𝑘𝓚, showing how each tradition adds distinctive contours to what the fair folk represent. Daimler also tackles how Christianity, modern fantasy literature, and pop culture have reshaped and sometimes flattened the complexity of these beings. With about 128 pages, the text keeps a brisk pace, yet it is buttressed by solid research, clear definitions, and an extensive bibliography, making it a credible introduction for newcomers while still offering value for those more experienced in fairy lore. From a practical perspective, the book is both welcoming and instructive. Daimler doesn't merely catalog mythic narratives, she asks the reader to engage, consider how the other world intersects with our world, how cultural and linguistic changes influence our understanding of fairies, and how practitioners might approach such beings with respect and caution. The author emphasizes that fairies are not simply whimsical creatures of childhood stories but complex agents tied to landscape, sovereignty, liminality, and culture. Some readers may find the brevity limiting, topics are often introduced rather than deeply unpacked, but the book succeeds admirably in its stated aim, to detangle the convoluted history of the world of Faery and make it accessible.
The second honorable mention is Freyr, god of the world, and 𝙂𝙤𝙮 𝙬𝙙𝙎𝙩𝙪. Now, when it comes to the amazing god that is Freyr, which is Freya's brother in the Norse pantheon, there are not enough books or references on him. This is literally the only book I could find that someone actually took the time to single-handedly write solely on this deity. Now, this is more of an historical, academic, scholarly approach. There's a lot of references, so it is a very dry read. It's a very academic type of read. It's not poetic or inspiring, and it doesn't really have so much like UPGs or devotional work, but it does get to the point in understanding the different places in the prose and poetic Edda, or in the sagas, or in the different Norse traditions of where Freyr was venerated and how he mattered to those actual people. I do really love learning about this particular perspective, and I do think that Freyr surprisingly has been a very big part of my Norse pagan journey, because Freya really did explain to me through my own devotional work, and this is subjective UPG, that, you know, you can't really have Freya without Freyr. They come together. They're almost like twins. So learning about this god has been really amazing, and I really wanted to find more historical research on him, but this is all that I could find, and I really do appreciate the fact that I have this book.
Frey, God of the World by 𝑒𝑛 Sheffield. In this succinct and thoughtful study, Sheffield revisits the Norse god Frey, often reduced to a fertility god of the harvest, and argues for a far richer and more complex portrait of his role in myth, society, and spirituality. By examining surviving Old Norse and Germanic sources, including sagas, kennings, and place names, Sheffield presents Frey as not only a deity of abundance but also a legendary king, divine ancestor, guardian of sacred space, and mediator between human and sacred realms. Her writing is clear and accessible, and though the book is relatively brief, under 100 pages, she manages to sketch a coherent argument that challenges simplified or popular notions of Frey. Frey, God of the World was published by Lulu.com, self-publishing platform, with an edition date of November 15, 2007. While the self-published format means it lacks the editorial polish and extensive peer review of major academic monographs, the book still offers value, especially for practitioners and readers interested in Norse religion who seek a concise introduction into Frey's broader significance. Its virtues lie in its clarity of focus and willingness to ask good questions, though readers looking for deep archaeological, philological, or comparative scholarship may feel the treatment is somewhat light.
Okay, so the last honorable mention is Fairy Fate in Ireland, History, Tradition, and Modern Pagan Practice by Laura O'Brien. So Laura O'Brien has her own Irish pagan school. She's very prominent and active on YouTube with her own YouTube channel, and she is one that is pretty much the representative of Irish paganism, honoring the historical facts of their culture, of their land, and working especially with the Morgan because she is a devotee of the Morgan. So I really found her YouTube video is very interesting and insightful. I am interested specifically in her perspective of the Fae, especially when it comes to an Irish perspective of the Fae. So that's why I wanted to get this book. This is really great. It has, given me extensive knowledge in the different types of fairies, where to find fairies, the behaviors and the misbehaviors and the proper etiquettes of doing things, staying safe from fairies, knowing that this is not going into a practice, working with the Fae blindly, thinking that everything is going to be sunshine and rainbows, that you do have to have certain protections and certain knowledges on how to have proper etiquettes when corresponding and bridging communication with the Fae realms. And I think this is a great addition. I absolutely love it. And this is my last honorable mention in my whole Pagan Portal book haul, and my 3 honorable mentions, which feel like Pagan Portal books, but they're not. But I just had to include them in this video for you to get more books for your reading list.
The last honorable mention. Faery Faith in Ireland by Laura O'Brien. In this engaging work, Laura O'Brien delves into the rich and complicated world of the fairy belief in Ireland, known as the 𝒂𝓘𝒶 or fairy faith, tracing its origins in folklore, myth, early Christian and post-Christian Ireland, and following how it survives and transforms in contemporary pagan practice. She examines how the fair folk, the 𝒂𝓐𝓐, were understood in local belief systems, the kind of interactions and etiquette that were traditionally thought necessary, offerings, respect, avoidance of offense, and how the notion of fairy faith offers insight into how the Irish people viewed the land, sovereignty, time depth, and the otherworld. O'Brien combs through folkloric sources, local anecdotes, and modern pagan testimony, offering a grounded yet accessible portrait of how the fairy realm persists, not simply as quaint folklore but as a living spiritual dimension for some. The book is published by 𝒿𝙬𝙬𝙬, Ireland, released in late 2021. It forms part of O'Brien's Celtic Pagan Practice series. The publisher specializes in Irish-rooted pagan and spiritual books, blending heritage, practice and folklore. O'Brien's background as a native Irish practitioner and scholar of Irish mythology gives the book a credible authenticity. Written by someone steeped in the land and its stories, it bridges academic folklore and devotional practice. The combination of historical overview, folkloric detail, and contemporary spiritual application makes it especially valuable for both students of Irish folklore and modern pagans interested in the fairy realm. That said, readers expecting exhaustive academic footnoting or comparative global folklore may find the treatment more practitioner-oriented than purely scholarly, but it succeeds very well in its goal of making the Irish fairy faith approachable, meaningful, and relevant for today.
Thank you so much for joining me today and for taking the time to listen to this video. I hope you found the books interesting, and let me know in the comments below what you think of the books and what books are you reading during this Halloween and Samhain season. What are must-have books for pagans to read? Let's continue adding to this reading list. I would really love to hear from you. With that said, I want to wish you all a most excellent day or night wherever you may be in this big world. Thanks again for sticking with me this long, and until next time, planet people,